Every Night is Game Night, episode 52, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea with Gamelyn Games, Michael Coe, and the designer, Scott Almes.
All right, we are back with Michael Coe from Gamelyn Games and Scott Almes from Designing World. Hey, guys.
Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing?
All right, we had a really great conversation about Tiny Epic everything last time, but that is not the extent of Gamelyn Games. Gamelyn Games definitely has Tiny Epic as its main engine, but you guys are expanding and you guys are doing bigger and bigger things. Enter this new game, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. Just tell us, maybe we just start with the game itself. Tell us a little bit about what went into the game, what's behind the game, and why you guys said, okay, we need to make a big 4X game now.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott. You start, and then I'll follow up.
All right. So I think it started off as just kind of I think Michael might have had the initial idea for it, but I mean, it's certainly a joint passion instantly where we'd done a couple Tiny Epic games together. I mean, Michael and I very much enjoy working together where we're texting every day about our designs and what we're coming up with and are calling each other every day working on all our projects here. And after doing a couple Tiny Epic games, we kind of wanted to see what would happen if we pulled out all the stops and do a really big, pride of your collection game. If you got like that one game that stands out amongst everything else, what would happen? What if we pulled out the stops with the components, the gameplay, just made this amazing deluxe game? And that kind of idea started to turn into Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. We went a little bit back to our roots, a 4X fantasy style game. I kind of tackled the gameplay end of it while Mike really started to run with how great we can make the components for this game. And it started to just become just a true passion project for us to really make kind of like the pride of someone's game collection. We wanted to still stick with a lot of the gameplay stuff that we do for our Tiny Epic series. We wanted it to be easy to get into, but we weren't going to constrain ourselves to like a half-hour gameplay or 45-minute gameplay. We still didn't want it to be a 8-hour-long game, so it clocks in about a half hour per player. It's normally what we say, sometimes less. But yeah, we wanted it to still be easy to learn, but have an amazing amount of depth to it. Tons of character abilities, tons of factions at war here. Every faction plays completely unique. You can play them 8 or 10 times and you'll still be exploring different ways to use them. And from a gameplay point of view, I mean, that was really exciting for me to develop, is a very simple action system that allowed us to have tons of depth, tons of rooms for expansion, and this really satisfying experience. And Michael came in and just made it gorgeous with his project management of this whole thing and how he took the project. He got the right team together. So I'll probably kick it over to him, and he could talk about the team he assembled to really turn this into just such a gorgeous end product.
So I pretty much just leveraged the whole company. I'm like, let's just risk it all, right? Because Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is unlike anything you've ever seen. This game is mind-blowing, and it's going to replace many games on your shelves. And the thing, so I got Chad Hoverter, who did these sculpts for Mice and Mystics and a few others, very, very talented, very well-known sculptor, spared no expense with that, I'll tell you. And so together we produced this based off of some beautiful illustrations with Adam McIver, who did Tiny Epic Western for us, and Ian Rosenthaler, who I've worked with in the past as well, and he kind of did the rework of Tiny Epic Defenders. So it was a couple of the best illustrators that I could find, the best sculptor I could find, and we created this just magnificent product. The base game comes with 80 miniatures. The expansion introduces another 80 miniatures. There's a ton of promos. I think all in, you're looking at like 176 highly detailed miniatures. And then Ben Schulman has worked with us since Tiny Epic Galaxies, and he has a very creative mind, and he helped develop the 3D constructs that make this board really just come off the table and come to life. So in this game, you're not just building a kingdom in your imagination and I have a new building now, let me move this token over here, and now that tells me I have a new building. No, you're actually constructing it, and you actually put a tower that comes off the board and stands a couple inches tall out on the region you build it in, or you actually tier up your castle. We have these 3-tiered castles that stand a couple inches off the board. Or you recruit a dragon, or you get a boat, and these are actual 3D constructs, and they have spaces for your miniatures. And so when you're sailing across to another continent to wage war on your opponent, you're actually placing your heroes of that army in that boat, and they are actually traveling, and you just get to see it, and you don't have to you don't pretend that, oh, my guys are in this ship, and that is because I have them on the side of my player board. No, you actually put them in the ship and send them across. And that is not cheap, I'll tell you. That we really went to the nines on this game, but there's no other game like it. There's no other game that's really doing that is marrying miniatures in all their glory and detail with beautifully illustrated 3D constructs on a gigantic board that's going to just take up your whole table. And it really feels like an RTS style computer game, kind of those old army, warring kingdoms and whatnot. But the toy factor, if you think the toy factor in Tiny Epic Quest is great, holy smokes, the toy factor in Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is through the roof. And when I have it out at like conventions, people cannot walk by without stopping. They get like a jarring stop. Like they do a double take, and then they go, holy smokes, what is this game? I've never seen anything like this. And we're like, well, it's not out yet, but hold on to your britches because it's coming out soon, and it's going to be a blockbuster. And like Scott was saying, the game design is phenomenal because it possesses the approachability of a Tiny Epic game. And instead of having to read this gigantic textbook and take a college course and do all this to try to learn a 4X game, no, it's like reading a Tiny Epic book where it's just a few pages of rules, and then you get right into it. There's not a lot of downtime. There's almost no downtime in the game. It plays fast. But yet by the end of the game, you're going to feel like you got the full 4X experience. Now, so if we kind of compare it to like Tiny Epic Kingdoms, I wouldn't say the exact same thing is true of Tiny Epic Kingdoms. I would say that Tiny Epic Kingdoms is like 4X Lite, where it kind of whets your palate. It gets you started on the 4X idea, but typically by the end of a game in Tiny Epic Kingdoms, you're like, oh, I was almost there. Like I just almost got the kingdom the way that I wanted it, and then the game ended, which is great because it makes you hungry to go back and play again. But in Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, you get there. You get to conceptualize your strategy. You get to build your kingdom. You get to pull off your strategy. By the time the game is over, you're not feeling like, oh, I really didn't get to do anything I wanted to do. You feel like you really put together this awesome kingdom. And then, maybe you did that better than your opponents, maybe not. And that, but it's just so much fun. It's been a hit every time I pulled it out at conventions. Anytime I've played it with other people, they say this is going to be in my top 5. This is going to be my new favorite. And so it's just the reception of it has been phenomenal, which is really a relief because we really put a lot into this game.
I have a couple of gameplay questions, and by the way, the excitement is just bursting off you. I almost want to play the game just based off you're almost like drawing me into the table. It's not even here yet. But so in terms of gameplay, you mentioned the no downtime, which is a really hard trick when it comes to a 4X game because it's a big game and a lot of decisions, and everybody has their own little fiefdom. And when especially in the mid game, you get all this stuff that you have to manage. So the downtime tends to be a big. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, you took that follow mechanic from Galaxies, and I think the follow mechanic is part of that secret sauce that makes Galaxies so popular. Like your turn, you have to pay attention to the board when it's not your turn. So was that kind of an intentional thing? It's like, oh, I'm going to yank this from this other game and put this in here because it makes this flow better. Was that something that you went into doing on purpose?
Yeah, very much so. So kind of one thing we try to do with all the Tiny Epics in one way or another is to really try to make you care about what people are doing on their turns. Sometimes a little bit on the lighter end, like for Western, you care about whether someone's going to duel with you on another turn, so that can get people interactive. But with Galaxies, we really hit that follow mechanic, and that's something that we wanted to bring over to Kingdoms. I mean, in Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. In Kingdoms, we also had a similar follow mechanic that whenever you take an action, everyone else has the option of doing it as well. But that constant engagement, being able to do things on other players' turn, that's very key for us because we want people to be engaged. We don't want people to sit around for 3, 4, or 5 minutes waiting for the turn to come back around with them. We want people to be playing as much as they're at the table. We don't want you to sit down at a table for 2 hours but only play for 20 minutes. We want you to play for 2 hours and have a fun time. Mm-hmm. So being that constant engagement, I mean, that's kind of a core principle for all of our games, not only the Tiny Epic ones, but we brought that over to Heroes as well. So it's something that I think came across very well in Heroes. Like Michael said, I mean, we were just at Gen Con and we were playing it constantly over there, and people were just loving it. I mean, they loved the engagement in the game. They loved the gameplay. Just a quick anecdote about Michael mentioned the board presence and how much it stands out. I think the first night we were there at Gen Con, we set up the game just to play amongst ourselves because it'd been quite a while since we had seen each other, so we wanted to sit down and play this awesome game together. So we set it up at a table at the convention, and Michael and a couple of the other guys we went with, they left just to go grab just some water and pop for everyone, and I sat with the game while they were just to guard our table. And by the time they came back, we had a whole crowd around the table. They probably thought I was giving away money, but everyone just came up and was just staring at this game. They came up and were like, "What is that? You need to tell me about this game. Like, when's it coming out? What's going on here?" And just ogling at the miniatures and the cardboard constructs. I mean, they were gone for 5 minutes, and we had probably 20 people around the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of playing for you're playing for 2 hours, not just like standing around for 2 hours. One thing that games like this do is they have a lot of negotiation, which adds to the time. I think of games like Game of Thrones, the board game, or even TI4, I guess it is now, definitely TI3. They do the 4X thing, but they add a lot of that back and forth. Okay, if we'll team up together, we'll go here, do that. I don't know that there's a lot of room for that in this game. Was that a conscious choice to kind of keep the play time down, or were you just going for a different vibe?
Well, that kind of stuff comes up through the meta game. I mean, it depends on the players. There's no official alliance mechanic or anything like that comes through it. There's certainly moments where you're taunting other players or, trying to side with another player to maybe get someone who's in the lead or something like that. But we let the players kind of control that on their own. We didn't feel the need to do it through the mechanics itself because I feel like it's a gameplay or it's a player-powered thing. If you're playing with a group who loves to do that kind of thing, you can do it. If it's a group that doesn't like as much as the wheeling and dealing and stuff like that, you can just play straight as is. But leaving that kind of stuff in the meta game was a conscious choice. In Tiny Epic Kingdoms, we did have a alliance mechanic where you could ally with players, but it's something we decided not to bring over to this game just because the mechanics allow for players to handle it on their own if they want to. But if not, I mean, the game just plays as is. Mm-hmm.
Now, with that said, we do have a couple of different modes that you can play the game. So we do have team play, where it can be 2v2 or 3v3 or 2v2v2. So if you all determine from the get-go that you want to play that way, then you can have alliances from the start of the game that last throughout the entire game, and you guys work off of each other in that way. And that really is a different style. It plays. It's the exact same game, but it feels like a different game, and so it really allows. This game, the replayability on this game is, I couldn't even explain how vast it is. There's, like Scott was saying, you could play a faction 10 times and not have explored that faction entirely. And across the base game and the expansion, there's 8 different factions. But then there's also the different play modes, like I was saying with the team play or the solo play. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this game, and all of them are going to be a ton of fun.
Awesome. I definitely wanted to take an episode to talk about just Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. The game itself sounds really cool, and I think a lot of our listeners have backed it, and they're pretty interested in hearing about the game itself. But it also has an interesting production story, which kind of played out in certain ways in a public way on Kickstarter. So, there was a unfunded project that was canceled immediately because of some shipping cost errors, and then the funded project, which had to get canceled because of various reasons. So would you like to share a little bit of that from your end? As this game was kind of had its Kickstarter journey, tell us a little bit of that story.
Yeah, well, I don't mind sharing that at all. Like you said, it is all out there. Kickstarter is a very public platform, which is what makes Kickstarter so great. And while some project creators they may kind of shy away from that or not, want to embrace that as much, that's something that we at Gamelyn Games have never been afraid of. We like the fact that it's a very public platform. We've always been very transparent with our games and our process. And you'd mentioned the shipping error, so that was something that Kickstarter themselves admitted to and recognized, and that's actually still a problem. They're still trying to work on that. But when you're creating your reward tiers, you have a feature to duplicate a reward tier if you've got a tier that's similar and you're just going to change a few things about it. So that's how I was constructing the page from the get-go, is I'd build the tier, I would duplicate the tier, and then on the duplicated tier I would change a few things. And that's all fine and well, and some of that is the shipping, and you can see the different shipping options, what countries, how much, right? And so in the duplicated tier, it presents all that information as well, and you can see it, and you can confirm, you can be like, okay, this matches, great, good to go. And then you click save, and as soon as you click save, it blows out certain shipping, and just kind of, it seems arbitrary which ones it blows out, but unless you go back in and reconfirm, so unless you double and triple check your work, which now from learning a hard lesson I do, but when you check it over once and you're like, hey, everything is perfect, there's nothing that would lead you to be like, let me just question myself and go back and look one more time. Like, it was perfect when I saved it, so why wouldn't it be saved? Well, unfortunately, it blew out a bunch of shipping options. And so then when I launched the project, people were backing it, and some people who should have been paying $20 for shipping were paying $60 for shipping, and some people who should have been paying $25 for shipping weren't paying anything for shipping. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what is going on? And I'm pulling my hair out. And once people back a tier, you can't change their shipping. And so once, so long as just one person has backed that tier, it locks that tier in. There's no changes you can make to that tier. And so there were no options except for me to just pull the whole project down, give Kickstarter an earful, and then go back and put it all back up. And they received it, and they were like, hey, look, we're really sorry. We recognize that this is happening. This is something we're working on internally and trying to fix. We apologize for whatever problems it created. But, so that kind of set it off on kind of an awkward foot, which, whatever, mistakes happen and stuff like that happens. And so, we got over it pretty quick. But, when we launched the project and everything was in order, there still was kind of an adverse reaction initially to the project, and a lot of that is not really any fault of our own or even the backers so much. I mean, to some extent, our own for sure. But the thing is that it's a very different market. So, you may have a steakhouse that sells $10 steaks, and on Friday night they're full, right? And they got a line out the door. And then you got a steakhouse down the street that sells $60 steaks and no sides, right? And they're packed and they've got a line out the door. So it's like, there's definitely very big markets for both high-end and affordable. And so in our Tiny Epic series, we had just built such a consumer base on these $25 games, which is fantastic. That's what has allowed us to grow as a company. But we didn't want to always just be pigeonholed into making $25 games. We want to put more into some of our games, and we want to have bigger ideas and be able to embrace these bigger ideas. But they're going to come with a bigger price point because you're getting a ton of stuff. Now, dollar for dollar to components and ratio and whatnot, like if you look at like the quality of Tiny Epic Quest and how much you get in a $25 game, and then you just scale that up. I mean, you're actually even getting a better deal in Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea for the amount of components you're getting, the quality of the components you're getting for the dollar you're spending. It's even a better deal than a Tiny Epic game, and that's saying a lot because Tiny Epic games are the best games you can get for $25. And so we're certainly not just inflating the price. I mean, we're at this point when we relaunched Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, which would technically be the third relaunch, but really I just see it as the second relaunch because I don't even really count that one with the shipping error. But we are under the markup of what would be considered the industry standard price markup. And so we're actually in giving this game away. We're pretty much hemorrhaging to give this game away because we believe in the game, and we know that once it gets to people's tables, then they're going to see the value, but they need to see it first. They need to know that Gamelyn Games is more than just the creators of the Tiny Epic series. We can make huge games and make them great and deliver fantastic quality, both in the gaming and in the components. But, they need to see that first. And so we understand that. This is an investment, really, because we intend to explore big games like Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea as a company with Scott Almes, so people can expect more of this kind of game in our Heroes brand. It's going to be a brand that runs simultaneous to our Tiny Epic brand. But it's starting over. It's starting from scratch. So when we launched the Kickstarter, the price point, it caused some sticker shock, rightfully so. Most of our consumers were used to seeing the $25 game. And so when they came in and they saw that fully invested, if you get everything, and that's a lot, then you're looking at, north of $200. That was pretty alarming to our consumer base. And so I think where I went wrong as a project creator was just not anticipating just how much that would kind of the effect that would have on the overall energy around the project. I guess I thought that there would be a little bit more goodwill transfer from our Tiny Epic series into our Heroes kind of universe that we're going to explore. But I quickly realized that it really is just starting from scratch. I mean, you really do just have to start completely over and build a whole new consumer base around this game because it is in such a different market than our small games. So that kind of got me, caught me off guard a little bit. And I love our backers dearly, and I am very involved in the projects. I read all the comments. I get back to everybody. I read the emails. I take everything that everybody says very seriously. And so I want to please our backers, and I don't want upset backers. And so when people were upset about the price, I was trying to be creative and find ways to deliver this awesome game, but at a price point that was more reasonable for them. And and that, so then was born this standee version of the game. And then, after a while, I was just crunching the numbers, and it's just like, I can't produce so many different versions of this game. I can't have like the unpainted version, the painted version, the standee version. I have to concentrate on really what we're going for here and what is at the heart of this game. And so it was a difficult decision, but ultimately I had to pull the project because I couldn't have so many different versions of the game coming out. I kind of was trying to dance around and make everybody happy, but that wasn't the right thing to do, and it was going to put us in a really bad position as a company. And so it was a tough call, but we canceled a funded project that was at $250,000 in funding and well past its funding goal. But it was for the better of the game because, like I said earlier, it's about putting out great game content and not just about a quick buck. And I didn't want to just be like, well, it didn't really work out, but let's just go ahead and put the game out there. That wasn't acceptable for me. I wanted to put this game out there in its best light and have this game have a showing that it deserves. But in order to do that, I had to take a step back. I had to take a break. We took a couple months off of Kickstarter before we relaunched it and kind of reorganize, get straightened out, and then relaunch with a solid core idea of what we were going to do. We weren't going to deter from that anymore, and it had great success on our relaunch. And
can I ask a question about the canceled funded game? So we were talking in our last conversation about Kickstarter, how you got your start when Kickstarter was just becoming a thing, and it was pretty exciting, and people were positive and everything. I think like recently, 2016, 2017, there's been a little bit of more of a antenna, like looking out for stuff, shenanigans, I guess, about Kickstarter. So like I heard a lot of comments about, oh, they pulled this successfully funded game. So what must have happened was they hit their funding goal, but they must not have hit their secret funding goal. So like there's this idea that, especially for these larger mini games, there's the listed goal, but no, really they have to make 5x of the listed goal in order to make any money in the games, but they hide that. And there's a little bit of, I don't know, I don't know if paranoia is the right word, but skepticism, that's probably the better word. A skepticism about like a listed funding goal. So were you aware of that particular line of criticism, and did you make any efforts to answer it, if so?
No, yeah, I was definitely aware of that criticism. I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on with my Kickstarter projects, probably like nobody else. I read all the BGG threads. I read all the Facebook group comments and Reddit, and you name it. I know exactly what people were saying. And there's Kickstarter is a very interesting environment, and anybody that thinks that they can just go on Kickstarter and for $10,000 produce 20,000 copies of a game is not really understanding the business end of things. Kickstarter is interesting, and whether you create a goal that fully covers every last penny of a game, or whether you create a goal that to you realizes the product market or justifies you as a company supplementing the rest of what's going to need for production are two different things. And so if somebody goes on there and says, hey, look, I've got a tiny epic game and my funding goal is $15,000, but really my final bill is going to be whatever. Let's just say that at $15,000 I would have X number of backers, but to produce that many games is going to cost me $20,000. So should I have put $20,000 as my funding goal? Well, what if as a company I'm willing to say that at $15,000 I believe that the market is justified. Therefore, I will put in my own $5,000 to complete that gap and will produce this game. And at $15,000, it's going to fund a little bit faster, which is going to help backers be more excited because nobody wants to be part of a sinking ship. And so there's this fine line and this kind of this balance of what's right, what's shenanigans, right? And if you understand the business end of things, running with a lower funding goal doesn't mean you're playing shenanigans or doesn't mean you're playing games. If anything, it means that this is the line of which you feel the product is justified and has kind of been a proof of product, right, or a proof of concept. And then as a company, you're willing to then pay the rest to put the game out there. So even though we raised ultimately on the second launch of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea $500,000, by the time I get this game out to backers, as a company, I'm still in the red. I didn't make a penny. As a matter of fact, I'm losing money on this game, like I said earlier. But I'm giving this game away for free because I want people to get the game. I want people to play this game and see how amazing this game is because I know that it's going to come back in the end. I know that when we release some to retail or when we revisit Heroes with another expansion or when we come back to the Heroes universe with another core entry, then people are going to have the experience now of owning a Heroes game from Gamelyn Games and Scott Almes, and they're going to say, these are amazing. They're the best games we've ever seen, both components and mechanics, so heck yeah, we're going to support this game. So I expect in the long run that it's going to be very successful for Gamelyn Games, but it's costing quite a bit of money to take that step and to start that new market for us. So, I mean, yeah, I was definitely aware of all of that, but I don't spend a lot of time with the banter, the back and forth with backers or potential backers on stuff that I don't feel is constructive to the creative process of making a great game. So if people come in and they're like, hey, this mechanic seems problematic, or hey, this faction I think should be like this, that's interesting stuff to me. Let's talk about that. I'll spend my time talking about mechanics and about different art things or ideas about how we can make the game look better, play better, be better. But when it comes to stuff like, I think you should have put $20,000, but you put $15,000. Why are you lying to us? That's not worth my time. They just don't understand kind of that I'm willing to invest $5,000. That's all it means. It's just I'm willing to lose $5,000 of my own money to make this game. How is that a shenanigan? So, I pick and choose my battles, but I appreciate everybody's feedback, and I don't spend any time putting anybody down on those forums. I don't come in and be like, hey, what do you don't have any right saying anything like that, right? Like anybody can say anything, and I will read every single comment. But when it comes down to it, I got to pick my battles about what I'm going to go back and forth with. And I would rather spend my time making a game better than trying to justify why I'm, as a company, investing in my own products.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. It really fills in a lot of gaps. Like you're willing to fill in the gaps with the money, and that justifies kind of lowering the price. And a nice low price motivates people to invest. And it's like, oh my god, 80,000, it's only making 50. But if the goal is 50, I'm more willing to invest. That all totally makes sense. So really, thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So from a designer's perspective, Scott, I think this is the biggest game in your collection that you've made.
Oh, by far. I mean, it's certainly the largest.
So, I mean, did you get a little bit of agita from this is your one big game, and the design stuff happens, and then the comments happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly unique working on such a big game and stuff like that. But I mean, it's Michael kind of detailed what our ride was with this, and it's certainly a unique experience doing this kind of game, and as he said, entering a new market. And that's something that I didn't appreciate either going in, is how that we really needed to get our foot in the door for a miniatures game. A little bit of the shock switching from Tiny Epic to a giant, this giant box of cardboard and awesome minis and much higher price point. It required a little bit more than just the goodwill. I think we've gotten there. Certainly, we've been, like I said, we were at Gen Con playing this game with people, and I think what we did and what we needed to do to get this game done was just the perfect plan. I think, Michael said, has the risk, he put in doing this and the effort and the financial backing he put into this to make it happen. It looks like it's going to pay off for us because the reaction has just been fantastic.
In terms of like the fan interactions, I mean, Michael's so active. I mean, it's just, the emails are always pretty prompt. As a designer, as people are kind of saying stuff that really doesn't have a lot to do with you, do you still feel that attachment to quote unquote your baby, where it's like, okay, let me try to, engage the community, or is it something like, okay, Michael, you take care of it, I'm just designing here?
Oh no, I mean, I'm probably not in the comments as much as Michael, because he certainly handles a lot of the extra business size and stuff like that. I won't normally jump in to talk about the finer things of ordering the game, but I mean, I love interacting with our backers, and it's been, from Heroes all the way back to Kingdoms. Each game has gotten better from backer suggestions. There's been tangible things in every game that has come from our backer suggestions, and I won't say no to a good idea no matter who it came from. So that interaction with the fan, I mean, it makes us better, it makes our games bigger, it makes us want to do better for them every step of the way. It's a reminder.
The difference is Scott's the talent, so he's allowed sleep. I don't sleep. and my partner in crime, Nate, who works hand in hand with the customer service end of things, and he helps answering the emails, and he kind of handles a lot of the emails. I kind of handle a lot of like the comments and the BGG threads. He doesn't sleep either, so it takes a lot, but we allow Scott his beauty rest every once in a while.
Yeah, I'm quite the diva, so it's in my contract.
All right, so I have one last question about Kickstarter in general. So, I'm obviously not really engaging Kickstarter, but I'm really interested in it. And like anybody who is interested in Kickstarter at all, I highly recommend Jamie Stegmeier's blog, which has literally hundreds of tips on how to handle Kickstarters, how to start them, how to build an audience for them. It's a really great resource. But I think within the last year or so, he's backed out of Kickstarter and he's not using Kickstarter for his latest release, which is Charterstone, for a couple of reasons. The fan interactions weren't always positive. For if things go wrong, that there can be some a little bit of flame, a little bit of uncomfort, which you guys definitely lived through. It's kind of a grind running a Kickstarter. Like you want the thing, from the couple of months before it launches, and then when it launches, and then fulfillment. It's just like you saying before, there's no sleep involved in that whole process, and for a couple of other reasons as well. I mean, have you considered kind of moving away from this really all-encompassing, maybe negativity-generating model, or does the Kickstarter kind of brand and the excitement it generates, is that going to keep you guys using Kickstarter for the foreseeable future?
Scott hinted on that when he said that there's all of our games have been improved in one way or another from the feedback of our backers. So Kickstarter is an integral part of our creative process. We never go to a Kickstarter with our game 100% done. We always are there at like 85, 90% done, right? But we've got enough wiggle room where we know that there are a lot of creative gamers out there, and they're very expressive, and that's why they love Kickstarters, because they know that if a project's being ran by a creator who knows what they're doing, then maybe some of their ideas collectively or individually will be implemented into the game, and the product will be better because of it. And so the money that they're putting in, and then the ideas and the time that they're putting in, is going to ultimately, they're going to end up with a better product because of that. And that's a big part of our process of making games. And so, there's a couple of approaches to this question where that's kind of the first approach. It's like, you'd be almost like asking, when are you going to stop having 10,000 people blind read your rule book and provide feedback before you go to print, right? It's like, why would I ever not do that? That just is going to make the rule book so much better, having so many people read it and provide their feedback before I go to print, right? Like, that's just, I can hire 50 editors, and it doesn't have the value of 15,000 people reading this rule book, right? Like, we go through quite the editing process with multiple professional editors that I hire, and we get the rule book to what is considered a final state, and then we put it out to our backers, and then we still get hundreds of comments about, oh, this could be interpreted this way, or this is slightly ambiguous, right? Like, and that always results in a better rule book for us. And plus, our print and play crowd is big, and we'll get thousands of downloads on our print and plays during and before the Kickstarter project. So, and then they come back with tremendous feedback. So it's like thousands of blind play testers and rulebook readers, and that's a really valuable part of the creation of a game. And so I am in no hurry to pull that rug out from underneath us because of the value that it adds to our products. And then there's the other end of it where it's like, at the end of the day, Kickstarter is a direct sale. It is, from the publishing house to the end user. There's nobody in between except for Kickstarter, but they're only taking 5%. The merchant fee is only about 5%, and then you may discount it as a Kickstarter incentive. And so, so maybe you shave 10% off the top, and maybe you give another 10, 15, maybe even 20% off the games to incentivize early adopters because they are being awesome. They are willing to put their money up and wait 9 months for the game to come, which is phenomenal. It's incredibly patient. So there's a value to that as well. But even then, that's still more money in the creator's pocket to produce a better game with than if we were to just move all of our units through a distribution company in which they want 65% off or they want 60% off and we're going to get 30%, right? Like, so the sales are just better through Kickstarter from that perspective, from a business standpoint as well. So, you can kind of cut it multiple ways, but from a creative standpoint and a business standpoint, it makes no sense to cut Kickstarter out of the equation if you're willing to weather the storm. And like I said, every backer is important. Everything that they say is taken seriously and is read. I don't think of them as trolls. I don't take an approach where it's like, oh, this person's just trying to bring us down, right? Like, there's a lot of context that's lost in messaging where somebody may say something or type something and it maybe seems like they're just trying to bring you down, but you don't, like, if you maybe heard them say that in person, you wouldn't have thought it was negative, but if you just read the plain black and white text, it appears negative, right? Like, so I take that into account when I'm reading the comments. Instead of approaching every comment as they're just trying to bring us down or they're just being negative, I think of it as the way you treat the one is how you treat the 99, or how the 99 perceive they'll be treated, or however that saying goes. But if somebody writes in, regardless of maybe how the tone is or how I could misinterpret the tone, I take a respectful approach to my response because I don't want to discourage all of the rest of the people who have ideas but have not spoken up yet from speaking up. If I take a negative approach and kind of fight fire with fire per se, then people who maybe had great ideas would be hesitant to speak up in fear that I may misinterpret them and then I may get defensive or something like that. And so I always take a step back, and I always try to take a real gentle approach with how I respond to people because I don't exactly know the tone in which they're saying it. And so instead of just assuming everybody's being negative, I assume everybody's just trying to help because that's why they're backing the project, is to help. And if I take that approach, it's never been a problem really to weather the storm. And even as an experienced Kickstarter creator where I've done 14 really more if you count before, I've done probably 17 Kickstarter projects. And so and even then, even with that amount of experience, I make mistakes, as was shown with Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. And if there's ever been an example of a project creator being burned at the stake almost, it was me on Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. And that's just fine because I know that most of it was good intentions. Most of it was people wanting to either make the game better or have their questions answered because they were just confused and they wanted a little bit of clarification. And so that kind of thing I'm not afraid of. I don't have any problem with the environment that is Kickstarter, whether some of it is legitimately negative or not. It doesn't weather me in that way, and so I embrace it. And in the end, we come out with a better product and a good business model too. So I'm not in any hurry to get rid of Kickstarter. I'll tell you that. I love the backers. I love the platform, and we're going to keep using it.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine that Kickstarter has been really good to you designer types, because there's a lot of publishers who come in and, really, really small publishers. They have like one idea for a game, or they want to make games, but it's kind of hard to partner. So I imagine you've gotten a lot of work just from these like smaller publishers, Scott, seeking you out. And it's like, oh, I hear, you're really good at these little games, or these the kind of little big games type thing. Here's a project. Have you found that?
I mean, Kickstarter has definitely allowed a lot of smaller publishers to get off the ground. I keep my small epic games unique to the Tiny Epic series. I don't play in that space with anyone else. But I mean, Kickstarter has allowed so many other publishers to come onto the scene. And I've certainly worked with some of them, like Green Couch Games, or some other small publishers that certainly wouldn't be around if Kickstarter wasn't a part of our industry nowadays. So yeah, I mean, it's opening up doors for many people.
All right, cool. So the easiest question of all. So what's next? Gamelyn Games, what's coming? We have Tiny Epic Kingdoms, The Dark War, Heroes of the Land and the Sea is in production. It is getting ready to ship. I mean, is that the stuff that's in the hopper right now, or is there something else that maybe you could share with the audience?
Yeah, so Tiny Epic Defenders and Tiny Epic Defenders The Dark War will be launching on Kickstarter very soon, within probably 6 weeks or so. We just want to get a few copies out to reviewers. We want to make sure that that the word of the game can reviewers can see the changes that we've done, help spread the word of those changes before we launch. And so we're just kind of in that process right now of putting together the prototypes. But once those reviews start rolling in, we'll be launching the Kickstarter. So that'll be here probably the end of September or the beginning of October. But people can expect to see that very soon. And then, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, it's required a lot of our time, and so we don't want to do it wrong. We don't want to rush it. So yeah, we're going to slow down just a bit in that, so that we can make sure that Heroes gets out right. And we're right on track for an on-time delivery as promised in March. So that's moving along very smoothly. And then, for 2018. We do have some very exciting things. We've not made any official announcements, but backers and fans of the Tiny Epic series can expect for us to create a couple of new core titles in that series that are very exciting, very innovative, very different than the Tiny Epic games that they've seen so far. So there's a lot of excitement coming for the Tiny Epic series in 2018. And we also have some really exciting things happening with Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea for 2018 as well. So I know I'm kind of being vague, but people that like that can anticipate that we're going to be back with a really great year next year.
I always got to dig for the exclusive, so I apologize for that question.
No worries.
And Scott, is there, I know you got Tiny Epic coming and all the Gamelyn stuff coming, but are there any other projects that you have coming that you'd like to highlight?
Those are certainly the biggest ones coming up. And then I guess another box coming up is we announced a game called Coaster Park that's coming out later on this year. So that's one we're talking about. But other than that, it's a lot of Tiny Epic. Yeah, can't tell you about the awesome stuff we have in store yet, but it's we're working on some pretty exciting stuff behind the scenes, I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you guys so much for spending, at this point, a pretty decent chunk of time on our show talking about Gamelyn Games, Tiny Epic, and everything that you guys going on. So, on behalf of Anthony, apologize that he had a little bit of a child apocalypse that he had to deal with. But, thank you guys for coming on. We're definitely looking forward to more.
All right, Jason. Thanks a lot for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.